Okay. All right. Hi, my name is Rob, and my wife and I, we've been with World Venture for 18 years, and we've been involved in French-speaking church planting in Quebec, Canada, and seen a lot of great things happen there, multiplying churches, and it's been the good and the bad all together. And recently we've made a transition to France, where we are partnering with multiple churches, Lord willing, involved in French-speaking church planting and a network of churches based out of Montpellier in southern France, as well as connecting with multiplying churches in Quebec and in North Africa. So really our focus is church planting and to see disciples multiplying disciples, becoming churches multiplying churches, and that's our passion. But as we're involved in church planting, what happens is you begin praying over a city, you begin praying over a community, and as you're doing that, God begins to reveal what's happening in that community. And as we're involved in spiritual warfare, we begin to see enemy strongholds in that community, and just a lot of the challenges and the sin issues and those kinds of things. And so as we're involved in church planting, and then as people are transformed by the gospel, that necessarily overflows into all of these different aspects of the community and of that city and of that region. And so we end up being involved in all of these different areas, to some degree, at least involved in planting the DNA, where we have eyes to see what God is doing, eyes to see what the enemy is doing, and then how to multiply and train people and send them out into these different areas. And in Montpellier, we're partnering with a pastor named Daniel. And what happened with him is God specifically opened his eyes to the presence of human trafficking in the city of Montpellier, amongst other things as well. He had already been involved in starting ministries, reaching out to university students, reaching out to Arab immigrant communities, a church planting strategy, all of these things. And then about 7 years ago, I mean, he's a really on the ground, he wasn't an ivory tower kind of pastor at all, really involved in this community. About 7 years ago, a woman from South Africa, she came and visited their church. And in South Africa, she was involved in fighting human trafficking. And so she shared at somebody's house what they were doing and how they were fighting human trafficking in South Africa. And then at the end of her presentation, she said, oh, and by the way, human trafficking is also a huge problem here in Montpellier. And that was a shock to Daniel, because Daniel, he's really, deeply involved in his community. He had no idea. And so he asked her, well, explain to me, how is this? What do you see? And she said, come with me, I'll show you. So that night, around midnight, she took him out, and they began to drive around the city, and she began to point out and how to have eyes to see what was happening. And she began to point out, and she said, hey, do you see those two girls standing by the bus stop over there? This is probably what's happening. You see this girl over there? You see those two Nigerian girls down the road over there? You see, oh, did you see that car drive up and pick up that girl over there? Look at what's happening. And began to drive around the city and systematically point out what was happening. Whereas he, and me as well, would just see a girl standing by a bus station. She was able to see, no, that's not just a girl standing by a bus station. That's a girl who is enslaved to a network of human trafficking, and she's there for a very specific purpose. Well, Daniel, after that time, I mean, he was shocked. And so he dropped this woman off at her house, and as he was driving back across the city, he pulled up in front of these girls, and he was just not sure what to do. And so he pulled up, and one of the girls came and opened the door and began to get in his car, and he was just said, no, I'm not here for that. And she said, well, what are you here for? And he didn't really know what to say, so he just said, Jesus loves you? I don't know. But driving away from that evening, he knew that God was going to hold him accountable and hold his church accountable and hold their group of churches accountable for the information that he had received that night about their community. But I mean, he was already overworked. I mean, he was already, their ministries, I mean, they didn't have enough workers already. And so what he had to do was over the following year, he reorganized his entire schedule. They reorganized the ministries in their church, and they were able to launch a ministry called Hope and Joy to specifically combat human trafficking, love these girls, and specifically, there are multiple aspects of it. There's a Romanian quarter, there's a French quarter, there's a transgender quarter, and there's a Nigerian quarter. And specifically the Nigerian piece, where you have these girls that are 13, 14 years of age, and they're promised to either school or they're promised a job in France, and they show up in France not speaking French. They have no papers, and all of a sudden the traffickers say to them, all right, now you owe us 30,000 euros, for everything that we've done for you. And so now you have to work for us and you have to give us that money, and here's how you're going to do it. And what they would do then is say, hey, we know where your family lives in Nigeria. We know where your cousins are. We know where your sisters are. And so if you try to run off, we'll go and we'll pick up one of them to replace you. And so there are some girls who have tried to escape, and that has happened. So Daniel started this ministry, and they began to go out once a week and just pray with these girls. And then they began to continue to do research. But he was convinced that as God revealed aspects of the society, aspects of the community, and things that were happening, that God was going to hold them accountable for what they did with that information. And so today, there's a multi-church partnership and a ministry in that city called Hope and Joy, and they work with between 60 to 80 girls every week that are trapped in human trafficking. I had the privilege to go out with Daniel and begin to learn what was happening and how they were fighting this and what God was doing. And God is doing some incredible things there in regards to reaching out to these girls and healing and breaking some of the networks and a lot of the things. And we're also, as part of World Venture, but also part of God's kingdom, we're also part of this global network of God's kingdom. And so it isn't just the kingdom of darkness reaching out, but it's also God's kingdom that is reaching around the world. And so we can also be part of the solution to fight this. And I would say that anybody who's going out to be part of a gospel movement, you're going to be shocked at what the enemy's doing behind the scenes as God begins to give you eyes to see. But he's also given us his spirit. And as we're investing in people, he's going to raise up people to go into all aspects of society, of a community. And we have the privilege and we have the responsibility to be a part of that as God calls us around the world.